Hi there folks, back again for another video. This one is a sort of additional video to what we were talking about earlier this week on the channel. So yes, if you've not watched the previous The Red Book of the Elf King video, it's probably worth going to check that out because I kind of give you an overview of the kind of basic sort of full war game that they put together, the folks over at Lucid Eye alongside Rick Priestley. What we're going to be looking at in this video is kind of exploring the range in a little bit more detail and going to a little bit more sort of in-depth stuff about the range and the models and things that they have available to them, whilst also talking about this. So in addition to the sort of full war game where you use a hell of a lot of models on either side, well, not a hell of a lot, but a bunch of models, sort of namely 6 groups of 3 companions and then your Thane in all your games and stuff. We also have Elf King Red. So Elf King Red is based on the Lucid Eye game engine, and this came out in 2020, as you can see. And the focus of this game was to try and provide you with a cut down, almost skirmish level game that you could play on the tabletop, sort of moving away from the sort of slightly more in-depth, intricate version that they had based around the Red Book of the Elf King, and instead making it a lot easier and quicker for you to dive into. So the focus of this one is similar in that it focuses on using the Isles of Eas as the kind of the setting for the game. You'll still have a Thane that you'll choose from, so that might be someone like Vashel Goldenhand or Lorik or Salian Blood Elf, Trollblood or whatever. But then you only have to have 6 additional companions alongside your commander figure. So say you're diving into the first couple of games you'd be playing, all you got to do is pick up your Thane and 6 additional companions and away you go. The game still uses D10s, but what it's done is it's kind of messed around with the mechanics a little bit to make it a little bit smoother and easier to play. If you've dived into the Savage sort of core setting that they've done previously, then you'll be kind of familiar with the way that things work, although things have been tweaked here and there obviously to make it more Elf King-y, Elf King ready. So I should also point out that all of the rules that you see here that we're going to be looking at are all available for free. You can get them over on the Lucid Eye web store. You simply put in a discount code, instead of paying 10p for them, you get them for free and you can download them to play your games with. You just need the miniatures to start having fun. So you've still got the kind of standard set of stats and stuff that you would normally have found in the game, which is kind of cool, but here's where things sort of tweak up. So you have the kind of sort of the initiative step, as it were, that you'll be working with, where you'll be rolling d6, adding it to your Thane's score, and that'll determine who wins. There's the rule of 7, which I think is quite nice, where if both players roll a natural 7 on their dice, then there's the chance that Fimbulwinter is coming in, and so that kind of marks the last turn of the game that might pop up occasionally. Then you have a special phase where you'll be casting all of your spells and that kind of thing and using special abilities, and then you move into the moving and the sort of basic combat of the game. So the move phase is done a little bit differently, where your Thane can activate, and then any companions within 12 inches of the Thane can also move, and then anyone who's not has to take a courage test in order to do their movement. I think it's kind of cool. And then you have, there's always the sort of standard things that come up when it comes to terrain and all that kind of thing, but you can read that later for yourselves. Combat is done slightly differently in this from the Red Book of the Elf King, where instead of you sort of rolling underneath your score, instead you're going to be adding things together. So you, for example, in this, what they show off here, you have the standard roll, then you will add your stat, and then that will be sort of what you'll get alongside a bonus for charging and that kind of thing, and then you compare that against what the defender rolls, and then whoever wins is the person that gets hit. So it's kind of cool, and means that combat resolves itself a little bit quicker than normal, which I think is quite nice. You then have range combat, which still works in the same way, although it's based around luck, and it kind of works on the same premise as previous as the magic and the range combat in the Red Book of the Elf King, where it's very much focused on the idea that anyone can kind of cast magic and spells and that kind of stuff. There's no sort of bowman and that kind of things that you'd be running around with. It's all based around the idea of rude magic and that kind of stuff. So they've kind of simplified it in that sense, which I think is quite nice. Again, very sort of focused on the idea of making this quick and easy and simple to play, rather than it being a kind of complicated mix of different mechanics and stuff to kind of get you started in the game and start playing some skirmish stuff on the tabletop. Yeah. As you can see, damage also works a little bit differently as well. So rather than kind of rolling against your defense later, you'll be rolling on these damage charts, and that will affect how hurt the individual is. So, for example, you might just be bruised and wounded. So you'll be instead rolling double and then picking the lowest score when you get hit next time, or you might be like full out wounded, taking damage, and that being reduced from your kind of model's health and being taken out of action. You then still have the same stuff that goes around the idea of circles and the Thanes and their companions, and you have the same sort of special abilities, although they've been sort of slightly tweaked, obviously, to work with this cut-down set of rules. But for example, here we have Vashel Goldenhand, who comes with 6 of his companion followers, and in a similar sense, you have Vashel Goldenhand, who is just great and comes with all of his basic stats, as you can see there. But then you have his companions that are themed towards him, as it were, which I think is quite nice. And then instead of you having a glamour deck that you choose from, instead you will just simply have a set of glamours that you can see built into the characters underneath their special abilities, alongside their artifacts and all that kind of stuff. But everything is more or less the same in terms of theming and aesthetic to what the characters were like at the beginning, which is kind of cool. So yeah, you've got it's kind of the core set of characters that you had the first time. So you have Vashel Goldenhand, you have Loric Angersand, Alonzian of Vastelant, which is kind of cool, Aurelea of Rifert, Salian Trollblood, who is like a kind of the Loki character that we talked about as well, and Meket Farseer at the same time. And that kind of brings up to the close. And as I say, the idea is that you'll be diving into very small, quick, easy games on the tabletop in sort of basic, standard, sort of mashed together skirmishes. It's not as in-depth in terms of kind of objectives and all that kind of stuff that you would have seen in the sort of core game for the Red Book of the Elf King, but you could always use those as the basis for what you do here. This is simply just to get you playing with the models that you got and sort of playing some quick games before you play the larger game itself. So yes, this is, and we're going to make everybody sick, Elf King Red, which is free and available to download right now from the folks over at Lucid Eye. But let's go and have a look at Lucid Eye themselves and dive into things in a little bit more detail. So this is the Lucid Eye web store as it exists currently. As you can see, there is Elf King Red, which is the sort of set of starter skirmish rules for you to begin playing the game. But what was quite cool is that the folks at Lucid Eye put together these 2 awesome kind of starter sets for you to start playing Elf King Red with a named character and then a set of 6 companions. So you have the one based around Salian Trollblood and his 6 companions, which I think is kind of nice. And there's an alternative miniature for Salian there, which I thought was really cool. And then you have the one for Vashel, which includes him as the High Captain there, with his sword at the ready and his helm under his thing. So it's another alternative model. And then you get the 6 metal companions. So it's essentially everything you need to start playing Elf King Red with 2 sets of models. So you could buy each of those for £22.50, and you could get the rules for free, and you could start playing Elf King Red right away, which I think is quite nice. You'll also remember that during the initial video that you saw, we had a look at the sort of core rules for the game. So you can still buy the Red Book of the Elf King rules, as you can see there. There we go. So here's the standard rulebook. As you can see, it's the one that I was flicking through. Still hasn't necessarily changed since the last time it came out, and it's well worth diving into and having fun with. It's even got a little bit of lore and awesomeness in it, which we had a peek at, and it's very good fun reading that. But beyond that, we also had a couple of additional books that have come out. Well, a second book anyway. So this is the second book of the Elf King, and it's the Troll Wars rules. So this comes in with additional stuff that builds on what you got in the first book. It also includes 6 new circles, as you can see here, alongside scenarios, and a vast array of additional special rules and that kind of stuff. So this allows you to play around with a lot more characters and a lot more fiendish fellows for you to use in your games, a lot of which are represented by the models that we're going to have a look at in a second. You can also still buy the Glamour deck, which is useful for the Red Book of the Elf King, the dice bag as well that you can see there, and also the dice set, which is, you know, much of a muchness. You can still buy dice everywhere, but if you wanted to get the things that you specifically wanted for the game, this is a good way to do so. But yes, so in addition to all of that we saw there in terms of rules, there's a huge array of amazing miniatures that came out for the game since the sort of initial release where I picked up stuff. So there's the Vashel Goldenhand model that I had in Sailing Trollblood. There's Elosian. There is Mexat and Aurelia as well, and Lorik. But then you also got a bunch of amazing additional stuff that came out alongside it. So, for example, we have Kufnir the Betrayer, which is one of your trolls. And then we actually got some troll models at the same time, which was always nice. And we're also going to open these because we're going to look at these in a second as well. So, let's just scroll up and see if we can find some of the cool mortals. There's one. And there's another troll for you to have a look at. And here's another mortal. So yeah, we'll look at these first and then we'll have a look at it. So here's Kufnir the Betrayer that was mentioned in one of the books. So this is your sort of troll that can be leading the way in battle. Looking very cool indeed. Another fantastic metal miniature there. And then here are some of the trolls themselves, which are going to be storming across the tabletop. I really love the design of a lot of the miniatures that we got from this range, because they dive into the idea of playing around with typical fantasy characters and races and factions, but also doing something a little bit different. And again, sort of latching onto the thing that I really liked about the Red Book of the Elf King to begin with, which was this idea of playing on Norse and Gaelic and Germanic and sort of Irish and British folklore, and in creating characters that felt like they weren't tied to a particular style of classic fantasy that you normally see in the West. Instead, they're very much inspired by that fey mythological sense to the characters, which I always quite like. And yeah, you've got a whole bunch of different models that you can use there if you're going to be going down that route. You also had the the mortals. So here are a couple of the different characters. So you have Brooks of the Out Isles, which is one of your mortal characters you could use on the tabletop. Again, going for that sort of classic, sort of Dark Age, ancient feel and look to the models. This one's got something of the kind of Germanic Gallic hordes that were battling across Europe against sort of the Roman times and stuff, so it's quite nice. And then you have some of these fellows here. So this is one of your troll thanes. Again, another amazing looking character that kind of runs with the idea of trolls being a little bit more like the giant folk of Norse mythology, a little bit like ice giants or Jotnar and stuff, rather than it being a kind of classic troll that you'd normally see, sort of the big hunched over fellows with big noses or something from Warcraft or something. So they've really gone down a route of creating some very interesting looking characters, I think, on the tabletop. Here's another one of them. So this is Wit Ironclaw, one of your mortal human thanes. Comes with his spear and shield at the ready, one of his awesome swords, looking very nice indeed. And then here are some of the mortal warriors. So these are your kind of classic standard men that will be fighting it out on the tabletop, kicking ass and taking names. Again, really nice look to them. Going down that route of being a little bit more Celtic, I think, in design, especially with the longer moustaches and the style of the hair and things. You could see these with big flaming red hair. If we were going to go like typically sort of stereotypical with the models, I suppose. But yeah, very nice models there once again for you to create some interesting warbands on the tabletop. You can also buy these big bundles, which I think is quite nice if you're going to be diving into playing like the actual game of Red Book of the Elf King. You can buy like these 2-player starter sets that have a couple of named characters that take you in different directions, which is always good to see. But beyond the kind of stuff that we'd seen there, we also got to look at some really fun sort of additional models over the last little while that kind of build on what the Red Book of the Elf King did when it first came out with that first book, and sort of telling different stories. So you have lots of different fun characters. So the Red Elf is one of the ones that I've talked about previously. I'm just going to bring up some of these because they're amazing. Let's just go through. Who's the other one that I really like? Yes, let's open that. And then that guy there as well. So since the second book of the Elf King came out, which kind of threw a bunch of new additional sort of characters and stuff into the mix and different types of warbands, I think we got to see a lot of sort of experimentation with things beyond the realms of just the Elven Thanes, and so that meant that we got a bunch of really fun new characters. So we had the Red Elf, which I think is really cool. So if you're looking to play around with someone a little bit more spooky, then you can do that. I love this model. I used him to create Elric of Melniboné, I suppose would be the way to say it. I think I've learned since last time. And I thought he was really fun. We had Greng Elf Troll, who was a mighty warrior with axe at the ready and a very cool sword. Again, there's so much detail baked into these miniatures as well that I think you could have a lot of fun with these, just painting them and collecting them, rather than just rather than using them to specifically play games with if you didn't want to. You've got Harmok the Dwarf Smith, and again, this is kind of going down the route of how maybe dwarves and elves and all that kind of stuff was viewed during that kind of period of the Dark Ages and the ancient times, where it's not your typical sort of bearded dwarf. This is someone a little bit more sort of stunted, a little bit more monstrous, which I think is quite interesting, and sort of plays into maybe this is the idea of what the elves see of other races, rather than being a race unto themselves is just some poor fellow who has been crafting away in the darkness and stuff. But a very nice model all the same. We also had this fellow from the third book of the Elf King. So this was Prince Erkilan the Damned, which I thought was amazing. Kind of got that demonic thing going on, and tying into the fact that there's always this demonic presence within the Red Book of the Elf King and the Isles of Eas on the tabletop. Looking very nice indeed. And then we got some sort of quirky stuff as well. So this is one of their more recent releases, but kind of builds on the monstrous creatures that live out there within the world of the Elf King. So if you're going to be diving into what they're hoping to do with their new role-playing game, I think this is a really fun model to kind of include in that, because it means if you're going to do some kind of dungeon delving based around the idea of the Elf King world, then this would be a fun monster for you to perhaps run into as you were adventuring out in the wilds or delving deep into all sorts of caverns and that kind of thing on the tabletop. But a very nice model all the same. And again, sculpted by Steve Saller, who has done pretty much everything for this, and I think does a fantastic job bringing all these models to life. You also had some additional stuff that came out quite recently, so you've got things like the Companion Captain. So if you're going to be running into sort of building on your companions and making them all just not feel like the rank and file basics of everything, you can have some captains in the mix as well, which is quite nice. And then you have some more mounted figures that came out a couple of years ago now. So you have the Hirhael, Blood Mother of Smotelshal, the Voxethan Thane. There we go. So if you're going down the route of running these kind of mystically mounted warrior women, you have these to play around with as well, which I think are fantastic. And I remember when these came out, I was like, whoa, these take things in a different direction altogether. Because imagine those done as spectral, ghostly steeds with sort of physical riders on the back of them, and then maybe a little bit of sort of glow coming from beneath. I think that would be really fun to play around with on the tabletop. And then you have this fellow, who I think is fantastic. This is one of the Forest Thanes that you can use on the tabletop. Root Nora the Elf King, which I thought was really fun. And again, goes down that route of playing around with the Fae and the ancient mythology, and sort of tying things into the idea of kind of strange circles of elves all working behind the scenes on their own thing while the real world sort of ticks away in the background. It's something that I loved, all the Fae stuff that comes out of the Harry Dresden books, and learning about the courts, and the winter court and the summer court, and this game really fed into that imagination, and I could see it being a really fun game to dive into, and a world to dive into and play your games with, or maybe even go as far as to do into dive into the role-playing stuff that they're going to be working on in the future. I think it would definitely be a great setting to kind of base something from D&D on, for example. I think that'd be really fun. But keep an eye out for more stuff on that, because I will definitely be talking about it in the future. But yeah, I think this kind of shows off just how interesting and diverse the range is from Lucid Eye for the Red Book of the Elf King. They have a lot of stuff here to be playing around with. They've expanded it vastly since the first book came out, and there is still a lot more to come. Even if you're not going to be playing, well, you could play the Red Book of the Elf King rules for all of your skirmish stuff, I think. And then what I think is quite nice about the collection as a whole is that I reckon you could use a lot of these miniatures to then take things to the next level, and maybe even play different fantasy games using these models. Like, for example, I think it would be really fun to play larger games of Oathmark using these miniatures. I think you could do the same thing with Warlords of Erewhon, which was the rules set from Warlord Games. You've also got Saga, Age of Magic that you could use these for, and especially with the idea of them being used as warbands, because they would work perfectly. Just choose a particular fantasy army that would fit the theme and just run with that. You could do Frostgrave themed warbands based around these. You could play all sorts of fantasy games using these models and have fun doing so. And I cannot wait to see what they do with the role-playing game, because I think that could be exceptionally fun. They're doing an art book first off, which I think is going to be really fun to kind of build on the setting of the game, which I can't wait to dive into. I think it's going to be amazing. And then from there, we shall see what they do next. But yes, the Red Book of the Elf King, make sure to give it a go. If you've watched the first video, then hopefully the second one has been informative when it comes to looking at more of the models. If you've not watched the first video, go and watch that. There'll be a card for it at the end of the video here, so you'll be able to go and have a look at it. But yeah, hopefully this has been a fun exploration of the rules and the range as a whole. I think it's really great. I love the metal models. I think the detail's amazing. I love diving into this world of elves and Fey Lords and immortal warriors fighting constantly against the forces of darkness and the darkness within themselves and that kind of thing. So yeah, make sure to go and check it out. Hopefully my enthusiasm has inspired you. As always, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and do all of that good stuff. If you would also like to help me out, there is also a link down below to my Ko-fi page. If you enjoy what I do and you want to help out, you can always drop me some donations there, and it will be used for cups of tea, which are always welcome, or cups of coffee, and maybe even to help build on collections, maybe perhaps for the Red Book of the Elf King. A lot of the money that is raised there goes straight back into the channel. For example, I've bought models and things that'll help me with my hobby and stuff that I want to do in the future for the channel here. But you don't have to do that if you don't want to. I know times are tight, so if you just like to share and comment and like, that would be perfect. So yes, hopefully this video has been informative. As I say, it's a kind of little sort of off-the-cuff stuff, but I very much enjoyed talking about this range and this game as well. Maybe go and give it a go yourself. It's free, so why not? And yeah, I'll be back very, very soon for another video. Bye for now.